Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain.
Everyone, welcome to Globespan Television. Tonight we have a special guest, my son, Rial Rose, and we all discussed Bitcoin and economics and so forth. But before we get there, I want you all to know that Globespan has been made available by Mr. Noir Singh and by Mr. Devin Bissoon and Rand Gobin, our two technical directors. We are a fair and balanced network. And on top of that, we ask anyone to come here to express their views without fear or favor. So anyone can come on Globespan and we'll welcome you at any time. The views expressed tonight are solely those of the guest and not necessarily staff nor of Globespan, staff or management of Globespan Television. And tonight we take a little break from politics to discuss economics and so forth. So this is something that, we'll do from time to time. So it's a chance for everyone to listen and to weigh in on what to be discussed tonight and see its importance. So at this time, I wanted to take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Rial Rose to the program. Rial, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Dad.
Okay. Now, just give us a little background of yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Montreal of Guyanese descent. Went to university, have a bachelor's degree in history, and been studying economics and been doing business. I have my own business. I run a real estate management asset firm, as well as now I'm fully dedicated to studying Bitcoin as well as other hard commodities.
Okay, great. Now, my first question to you, and this is a question I hope, will be of benefit to all our listeners. The US currency is a global currency. Most countries in the world have been using US currency. Is it an advantage for the US to allow other countries to use its currency or to make it a global currency, or it's a disadvantage? And can you tell us if this has increased the US debt over the years?
So there's like two parts to the question. So I would have to give a little bit of a historical background to this question. And I would say that we would have to go back to the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, where it was decided during World War II that the US would be the reserve currency of the world at that time, right? And that basically set the system up where the dollar would be used for trade all across the world. And nations who participated in that would peg their dollar or their currency to the US dollar in exchange for $35 per ounce of gold, right? So that's how that system started. And that continued on until 1971, when Richard Nixon depegged actually removed the gold standard from the US dollar. So, in regards to your question, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have the US government that has the reserve currency that gives them tremendous power, basically, to sanction other countries as well as outsource their inflation. Now, on the other hand, it's a not a good thing for themselves because it puts them in a predicament where they, over a long period of time, they run trade deficits, right? And this is something that John Maynard Keynes back in 1944, he was the world-renowned economist, had stated, and he was in favor for a reserve currency that had was a basket, and it was called Bancor, basically. So it'd be made up of a different currencies from across the world instead of having just one, right? So when you have that situation where the United States is the sole reserve currency, now they have to run deficits to provide liquidity throughout the world, right? So in essence, it's a double-edged sword. So you have the Triffin's dilemma, and that was came an idea that was came up by economist Robert Triffin in 1960, where he basically said that this is not a good system for the United States over the course of a long time because they're going to be running major deficits in order to supply the world with liquidity, which is US dollars. And it makes it also very difficult for the US Federal Reserve because now they have to take into consideration inputs from central banks from all across the world. So that's one part of the question. So the other part of the question is it good for other countries to use the reserve currency of the United States? And you can argue that on one hand, it's good because the United States, through the SWIFT system, makes it easy for them to basically trade and have access to the US dollar because the pipelines are already created for countries to exchange their currency. But then on the other hand, it's not a good thing because now you become subject to US sanctions. If the United States decides that they don't like you because you sneezed incorrectly on a given day, and they put sanctions on you, then you're in a bad position, such as Cuba, Iran, and now Russia, right? So, what does that do for countries? It makes it more expensive for them to trade because now they might have to trade with a US dollar that's at a higher value, right? So then you run the risk of having importing the US inflation, which makes the goods and services in your countries more expensive. For instance, if you take the Caribbean country of Guyana, their actual inflation rate is of 4.1% this year, and it's projected to stay that way. However, since 2020, they've lost 23% of purchasing power, right, over time. So that does not necessarily help their situation. If I can pull up a quick screen here, and I'm going to share my screen to show you some charts here. So what chart do I have here? Oh, this is the gold chart. Bear with me. So as I look for this chart, did I answer that fully, your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So let me just find the chart of Guyana's loss of inflation. Do you see my chart on your screen?
Yeah, I'm seeing the chart. Yeah,
Okay. So you see the cumulative GYD loss of value due to
yeah,
inflation from 2020 to 2025.
right.
And you see here, Guyana has lost about 23% due to inflation. And I attribute this because they're using they have to trade in US dollars as well as, high production costs, et cetera, right? So now if I were to share with you another chart over here, let me pull that up real quick. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, and I'm new at this, so this is my first go around. So bear with me for a second here. So purchasing power. Um, do you see this chart here of purchasing power?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Yeah,
Okay, so this chart here of purchasing power. Now, if you would have saved, if a Guyanese person would save 1,000 Guyanese dollars in 2020, today that dollar would be $811 of purchasing power, meaning that you would have lost 23% from that time period. So it makes it more expensive for you to buy food, goods, and services. Currently, right now, actually, the average Guyanese person will spend about 60% of their income on food.
Well, that also applies to most third world countries, am I right?
This applies across the board actually right now. What you have is you have inflation in the United States and the major countries. All of them are suffering from inflation due to excessive money printing. Because what happened after Richard Nixon came off of the gold standard in 1971, they basically came up with the petrodollar, but there was nothing to stop them from printing excessive amounts of money. So you had the Vietnam War, you had the Iraq War in what in 1997 or 98, and then you had the second Iraq War in 2001, and then 2002 you have Afghanistan. So that led to trillions and trillions of dollars of spending, which leads to inflation in the United States. And then you have that also impacting the rest of the world, except for China. They're going through deflation because they can produce a lot of goods and services for cheap.
Okay, you can take your chart down.
No.
Okay, my next question to you is this. You know, the US is having a huge deficit right now. It owes at least about $37 trillion to other countries, or I should ask you, who the US owes that money to?
So you have a number of countries and themselves. Is my chart down, by the way?
No, it's not done.
Okay, hold on. Let me see here if I can get this down. Is it down now or is it still up?
It's still
It's
there.
still up. Bear with me for a second here. Let me get this chart down. Close the window. It's
Okay,
down now.
good. Yeah.
Yes. So your question was in regards to the US deficit. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, the $37 trillion, and that is climbing. Who the US owes that money to?
Well, they borrow themselves, so they owe it a lot of it to themselves. You also have the Chinese, and I have a chart for that actually. Let me pull that up real quick and I'll share that with you. You have the Chinese that have about $700 billion, Japan, UK, Luxembourg, Belgium, Canada, a whole host of countries.
Okay. And
So if you see here, this chart, oops, go ahead.
okay, what can US policymakers do, Congress at least, to reduce that deficit? Or would it continue to increase?
So the plan here that the United States government has under the Trump administration is to inflate away the debt. That's their idea. So what they're going to do is basically print money to build up industries, and that's why you have this tariff regime going on here. Now, what they're going to
Let
do,
me interrupt. Can you remove the chart
yes,
so that
let
you
me
can be
remove,
seen?
yes, let me remove that chart. Is it gone now?
No, it's still there.
Bear with me. Okay. Is it still up?
Yeah. I don't know why this is up.
Okay, let me close this chart. Okay, why is it not closing? Forgive me here. Did it close now?
No, no, there's a chart still up there.
Okay, hold on. Let me find this. Stop share. There we go.
Okay, good.
Okay, so what was that second part of the question again?
Can the US current debt be reduced?
So the plan is to inflate away the debt. I don't believe it's going to be reduced. What I think we're heading to is going to be a new monetary regime at some point in the future. But for the moment, the US plan is to basically reindustrialize the United States by bringing factories and business back to the United States to grow the economy and to eventually pay off the debt. That's one aspect of what they're doing. The other aspect of what they're doing, and Trump mentioned through the Stablecoin Act, is to basically use stablecoins as well as potentially Bitcoin to offset the debt. So over time, I don't believe that they will be able to do it. However, what I think will happen is that they'll be able to kick the can down the road and extend it through stablecoins. And I would have to explain how stablecoins would work. So stablecoins is a digital asset that basically you can peg to the US dollar 1 to 1. And they want to use that to export it to the rest of the world so you don't have to deal with dollars. Because when you deal with dollars, many of the times it's difficult for many people to access dollars in different countries. So stablecoins, you can use it through your phone, right? And you can use it through different apps to get access. So people in countries such as Nigeria or anywhere across the Caribbean would be able to access US dollars through the stablecoin. But again, it's something that I believe over the long term won't work. And I think that what we're going to see within the next 20 to 30 years possibly is a monetary reset. And what does that mean? I think you're going to see a basket of different currencies being used by different countries, such as the Chinese yuan, the European euro, the US dollar, as well as gold, because now you're seeing a rise of gold being accumulated by central banks across the world.
Okay, good. Now, it is said, and this is a question I think you'll be able to answer very well, that countries using the US dollar is prone to US inflation, meaning that they are importing US inflation into their economies. Is this true or false? And if it's true, explain.
Yeah, I believe that that's what exactly happens. So whenever the United States starts printing money, it debases the value of that currency. And these countries will have to use that same currency to either borrow through the IMF or the World Bank or get access to dollars that is going to be debased, right? So that means they're taking in a lesser amount of value for whatever it is that they're using to trade with, which makes it more expensive for goods and services. And that's why you see inflation throughout the world, with the exception of China and a few other countries.
And you talk about inflation, let's go to cost of living here. It's a global phenomenon right now. It's affecting countries all over the world. China, I think it's low, I know. So what can be done, and especially the developing countries, Guyana, the Caribbean, the African countries, Latin American countries, and so forth. What can be done to reduce inflation in these countries?
Well, I think the easiest thing that many of these countries can do is just use their own currency and stop using the US dollar. That would be the easiest first step. Second step would be to start a reserve of gold, to hold gold in their treasuries to basically offset the cost. So the price of gold is up 60% this year, whereas the US dollar is down 10% this year. So if you're holding gold, you're making a profit there, right? And you have leverage now that you can use to help you buy goods and services at a cheaper price. Now, there's another asset that people can use as well, and that's called Bitcoin. And we can get into what exactly is Bitcoin, but it's a
Yeah, I'm
cryptocurrency.
coming to that. I'm coming to
Right.
that just now.
Yeah, and that's the fastest horse in the race, right? So countries like Guyana, for instance, who are doing very well due to the money they're receiving from oil, can allocate a small percentage of their annual profits towards Bitcoin. And that has basically increased an ROI of 50% a year, which is tremendous. Some years you even have 100% a year. So you have, for instance, a country like El Salvador that has raised billions of dollars and they have Bitcoin in their reserves and doing extremely well. They're actually developing a new city and having technology grow throughout the country, which stimulates the economy even further, right? You have the education that takes place as well. So what does that do when you have hard assets? And that's the question a lot of people have to understand, that fiat, which is currency money that's based off of nothing or backed off of nothing, just basically what fiat is basically the government saying that that currency is good and is backed by the government, right? So you have something like gold, for instance, that is a hard asset and is very scarce. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to produce gold. You have to find the mine, you have to have power that runs to this mine, you have to develop energy sources to get there. as well as have labor. So it's very labor intensive and cost intensive and scarce, which makes it a hard asset and extremely valuable. So if countries around the world would start to accumulate gold, it would offset the inflation that they are currently having. And you can say the same thing for a currency like Bitcoin.
But some countries don't have gold. So what happened to those countries?
They can start accumulating gold.
Buying it.
Yeah, correct. That would be the wisest thing to do, as well as using their own currency, if possible.
Okay. Now let's get to cryptocurrency. And you're a cryptocurrency specialist. You normally we talk about this on a daily basis. Even your little daughter, Zaria, knows about cryptocurrency. Now, let me just ask you this question for our audience. What is cryptocurrency?
So cryptocurrency is a peer-to-peer ledger that you can use. So you can use cryptocurrency to trade with. So and to basically exchange value, right? That works on a blockchain. So I, for instance, can send you money basically through an app or a phone without a third party intermediary like a bank or Western Union at a pretty low cost, and you do it rather quickly. So it's all digital. It's a digital asset. That's what cryptocurrency is that runs on a blockchain. And what is a blockchain? A blockchain is like a ledger, a big receipt, right? So you know when you do a transaction, you go to the store, they would give you a receipt for what you purchase, or you go to the bank and you have a ledger of whatever your deposits may be. Well, this is the same thing, but it's a digital ledger that's immutable, right? It cannot be erased, right? And it's distributed in networks called nodes all across the world, right? So when you have something like that, it basically enhances and helps the average individual trade and basically at the same time preserve their value. Because right now, something like Bitcoin is used as a store of value.
Okay, you talk about Bitcoin. Now, and again for our listeners, what is Bitcoin and when did it came into being?
So Bitcoin came into being in 2009 and it was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, and nobody actually knows who he is. It's kind of this, divine individual that kind of disappeared in a way. So it's very interesting because there's no centralized point. So for instance, like a currency like the US dollar or the Guyanese dollar, it's printed by a central bank, right? So there's a central entity. With Bitcoin, it's a distributed ledger that's run with nodes all across the country and the world, actually, and protected by miners. So that's what Bitcoin is. It's a peer-to-peer network where I can exchange value with a person. In a nutshell, that's what Bitcoin is. And it started in 2009, and today it's still around after all these years, and it's doing pretty well. It's up millions of percentages since 2009 and continues to rise as governments basically inflate away their debts and basically print money.
Do you know of countries that invested in Bitcoins?
Yes, El Salvador is one, and the United States is actually holding billions of dollars in Bitcoin itself at the current moment and moving towards, I believe, in the future, making it a reserve asset. China also holds Bitcoin that's confiscated because most of this Bitcoin that the United States and China holds is confiscated. And many other countries, such as the UK, also holds Bitcoin that were confiscated.
Well, why countries hold Bitcoin? What it does for those countries?
Well, it gives them a strategic advantage. And what it does is provides that country with a hedge against inflation, right? So if it's like gold, right? You hold gold to provide some stability and a hedge as well, right? So that's why many countries are starting to move towards it. You know, don't get me wrong, there's still many countries that are against it. The EU is slowly moving towards it, Canada as well. However, at the same time, there's many valuable aspects. And what does that do? It opens up your economy to a new monetary system that's transparent and basically immutable. And transparency is needed in this current era when governments, you don't really know what governments are doing. Things are very opaque and they're just printing money ad nauseum.
Explain to our listeners what is that new monetary system you just spoke about?
Well, it's we're moving towards that. So right now we're currently on a system where the United States dollar is the reserve currency. And due to sanctions over the past 20, 30 years, and especially in regards to Russia, when $300 billion was currently seized, the rest of the world was shocked. And they said, what in the world is going on here? And with the deficits the United States is running, many people believe that the US dollar is not going to be a sustainable store of value over time. So, what countries are doing is basically moving away from the dollar and towards their own currency, buying gold, backing it with gold as well, and some other countries with Bitcoin. That's where I see the world going in the future, where you will have a reserve of baskets. You would have a baskets of reserve, like I mentioned before, the euro, the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the Chinese yuan, gold, and potentially Bitcoin as well.
You're saying, if I'm right, you're saying that because most countries are using the US dollar for trading purposes and as the reserve currency and everything else, and this is why the US have an upper hand on them and can impose sanctions on them.
Correct. That's one thing amongst many other things. And then it provides the United States with liquidity that makes it easy for them to print money and lend that money. So you have credit cards, loans, mortgages. You can you can have cheap money, low interest rates like you've had between 2010 to 2020 until they started raising rates somewhat in 2017 and then again in 2020 during the pandemic. So that affords the United States some luxury. However, at the same time, it works against it's that Triffin dilemma, that double-edged sword that we mentioned before, where it leads to increased deficits, trade deficits, but at the same time provides you with liquidity where you can borrow and money cheap and basically financialize your economy.
Now, if we're to look at the US currency, it's been there since, let's say, 1971, when the goal was removed. Nixon removed the goal as that's 29 plus 25. That's 54 years. Do you think people are going to go, or countries going to go towards Bitcoin, which is a new currency, and they don't know if it's stable or unstable?
Well, Bitcoin is volatile. I'm not going to deny that. However, its volatility comes down over time. It's a $2 trillion asset compared to gold, which is a $30 trillion asset, which is far less volatile. So over time, I believe that Bitcoin will be adopted by more countries, more sovereign wealth funds, more individuals as they understand it, because it has properties that are great and it's easily adoptable, it's saleable. You can move it across space and time very easily. I can send you Bitcoin within 5 to 10 minutes, if not less, right? Imagine trying to do Western Union. How many days is that going to take? 2 to 3 days. Then you got to go to the Western Union. You got to go to the office and get it and pay no ends of fees versus Bitcoin. I can send it to families and people are using it as for remittances all across South America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and you can send money instantly.
But how can you send money to, with, let's say, for example, Guyana? If I'm in Guyana, ask you to send me some money, you send Bitcoin. How would I change that into currency?
On an exchange. So you can send it to an exchange, right? Such as Binance, Coinbase, or you can use a DEX, which is a decentralized exchange, and convert it to USDT or USDC. But if you actually use an exchange that's approved by the Guyanese government, you can now take that Bitcoin and exchange it for Guyanese dollars, right? So that's one thing. So we're at this stage. It's still early. It's still a nascent asset, right? So right now, the plumbing work hasn't been put into place yet. That's what we're moving towards, right? So what I mean by the plumbing work is means for you to be able to use Bitcoin to buy food and services, right? So once that is laid out over time, it'll be easier to do so. Because if you look at Bitcoin adoption, it's you have already 400 million users. It's moving faster than the internet did
But 400 million US to 8
across
billion
the
people
world.
around the world, it's nothing.
That's what I'm saying. It's nascent. It's new. So you want to get ahead of the curve at the same time because it's something many people speculated on it very much. So the value of it is going to continue increasing over time because what Bitcoin is a black hole for liquidity. And when governments print money and they have large deficits, the smart investors will take their money and invest it into hard assets such as gold, real estate, and Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the fastest horse. Over the past 5 years, Bitcoin is up, more than 10x, right? So it's a store of value for many people as well as governments.
Okay. Folks, you're listening to Globespan television here in New York, and we're coming to you live. Now, we just stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be taking a commercial break.
Oil is transforming Guyana, and the entire Caribbean is watching. But beneath the promise of prosperity lies a deeper risk, the rising threat of climate change. Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood explores this high-stakes intersection of economics, politics, and the environment. Author Ive Law Lloyd Griffith takes you inside the region's oil ambitions and reveals how climate vulnerability could shape its future. This isn't just a policy debate. It's about coastlines vanishing, livelihoods shifting, and choices that will define generations. Packed with insight, data, and sharp analysis, this book is essential reading for anyone who cares about the Caribbean's future. Are we on a path to progress or peril? Dive into the story that affects us all, Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood by Ive Law Lloyd Griffith.
We're back on live, so thank you all for staying in tune. Now, let's get back to Bitcoin. How can someone invest in Bitcoin? Where can you go and buy Bitcoin?
Well, you can buy Bitcoin in the exchange, but right before I answer that question, I want to be able to show you Bitcoin's performances from year 1 to year 10 versus gold and the S&P 500, which is US stocks. And you can see the numbers there from year 1, 288% to year 10, over 437,000%, right? Gold is having a good year now. It's up 60%. So I congratulate all the gold bugs because the gold bugs have been correct in their analysis about fiat currencies basically going to zero. They've been arguing for the longest time that the US dollar and all other fiat currencies lose value over time, right? They don't hold their value because they're not pegged to anything. They're not worth anything. There's nothing really backing them except for the word of their governments. For instance, the United States, I believe, uses what we call the term proof of war. So the US dollar is backed by war, right? If you don't use the US dollar, you might see a gunboat show up near your country. So these are some of the things that countries are starting to realize and take into consideration when they're looking at the performance of gold and Bitcoin. Now, to answer your second part of the question, you saw those stats there. I'm going to pull up where you can find Bitcoin on exchanges such as Binance, Coinbase, and a number of other ones you can find as well. I have here, let me pull that up real quick. Bear with me for a second. So I can show you, I prepared this one where I can share with you guys where you can find exchanges that people in the Caribbean can actually use for themselves. So Here we go. Oh, yes, right here. I'm going to share this right here. Do you see this over here, the exchanges?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So you have Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, BitJet. There's a whole bunch of them they can use for simple. You would have to do KYC with this. So basically it would be know your customer. So you would have to register with them, give them your personal information, and then you would be able to trade on these platforms.
Okay. So Bitcoin, if someone invests in Bitcoin, it can be very profitable for them.
Yes, yes, very profitable over time. But the way Bitcoin works is in cycles. Is there's 4 year cycles and halvings. So the way it works is that every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's mined is cut in half. So it's very similar to gold. You know, you have to go out there and basically mine gold. You would have to mine Bitcoin. However, it's done with computers. You need computational power and it takes electricity. So a lot of folks argue that Bitcoin is backed by energy, such as electricity, you know. So yes, it does go up over time. And if I may pull up Guyana's, for instance, Bitcoin in regards to Guyana versus Bitcoin, the Guyanese dollar, and its performance here, bear with me for a second. You see that Bitcoin is completely outperforming the Guyanese dollar. Okay, so I find that here. I'm going to share the screen once again. Okay, so you see here some of the key sites. In 2010, one Bitcoin was worth 18 Guyana dollars.
Right.
And today it's worth 22 million Guyana dollars. But the good news, folks, is that you can actually buy pieces of a Bitcoin. It's called sats. So you don't have to buy an entire Bitcoin. You can buy $5 worth, $100 worth, $1,000 worth, $100,000 worth because it's easily divisible, right? So that's one thing that you can do. And you can see the growth here. The percentages in Guyanese dollars is astronomical. It's up over 124 million% since 2009. And it will continue to grow because one of the questions people will be asking, they'd be like, you know, and I'm going to try my best with my Guyanese boy accent, and they'll say, hey, boy, this thing is so expensive. How you going to buy this thing? And you can say, well, yes, I understand it's expensive. There is basically diminishing returns, but over time, you can buy it and it'll still gradually go up. And I believe it's going to go up exponentially because the United States government will continue to print forever.
Could Bitcoin become the currency of the future? Do you think?
I believe it can be one of many, yes.
Okay. Now, so from what you're saying, Bitcoin is very, very profitable. And from what I read myself, since Bitcoin came into being, it has made 24,000 millionaires in the United States.
Oh, okay. Well, that's news to me. There you got a stat that I didn't know.
24,000 millionaires in the United States, Bitcoin. So
Right.
it is very, very profitable.
It is profitable. But however, the way Bitcoin works is that I mentioned this before over cycles. So you want to understand the cycles before you jump in. So right now, where we are currently in the cycle is towards the tail end. So so the halving that occurred was in 2024. It was April 20th, 2024. So you want to get in a little bit before the halving in what's called the bear market. Now, this is the investment, okay? And I would say that this is not investment advice. You should do your own research. At the same time, I'm going to share with you how Bitcoin works in regards to the cycles. So there's halvings every 4 years. There was a halving in 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2024, right? So in 2024, Bitcoin was broken down. And now what you have is that you have 3.12 Bitcoin that are mined every day, right? Because it has basically a declining supply, and that's what makes it so valuable. There's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined between now and the next 100 years, right? So that on itself makes it even more scarce and a harder asset than gold, because every time the price of gold goes up, people tend to find more gold, right? And produce more gold. They dig up mines, they find more gold. Whereas Bitcoin, that's not possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, it should make sense to our listeners too, because it's very, very simple. Now, Bitcoin, as you said, is not a stable currency. But if it's increasing like that, don't you think, when you think it can become a stable currency?
Over time. So right now there's stages to Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin started off as a collectible item in 2009. And then they were trying to make it a medium of exchange. However, that did not necessarily work due to the volatility. So what happened is that these people shifted towards making it a store of value. So you hear these terms hodl, hodl. People will hold their Bitcoin and not spend it, similar to gold. So that way you have less supply on the market, which makes it illiquid and thus leads to a price shock and rises in value, in addition to the halvings that cut down the supplies. So right now, Bitcoin is being used as a store of value, and hopefully the next step, and in some places being used as a medium of exchange, but the next step would be to be using it as a medium exchange where individuals can buy goods with it, right? And then over time, it moves towards a unit of account, like the US dollar is correct today, where most things are priced in dollars, and that's called the unit of account. When will that happen? I don't know, but it's a progress over time. So if you want to look at Bitcoin, like adoption of the internet, for instance, and the internet's been growing over time, and I believe Bitcoin will do the same thing. Here, I'm
Okay.
going to share my screen with that, with Bitcoin, it being its adoption for the internet, right? So if you take a look here, the internet is in white and Bitcoin is in yellow. And we're seeing that Bitcoin is outperforming the internet in regards to adoption globally, right? There's over 400 million users, at this period of time. And if you compare that to the internet, it was a little bit under 400 million users in the year 2000. And today you have over a billion internet users, right? So I believe that you're going to continue seeing this growth in Bitcoin. We're in the early stages, even though it's priced at 100,000 US dollars, which is about $22 million in Guyanese currencies. It's going to continue growing. And the projections are by many people, such as Michael Saylor, whose company has a Bitcoin treasury, who believes that Bitcoin will hit $1 million by 2035. My projections are that Bitcoin is going to hit at least 350,000 by 2030, if not before. So there's a lot of upside still left as long as you are somebody who has low time preference. And what I mean by low time preference is that in Bitcoin, you tend to change your mindset. It's pretty remarkable how this actually works, and it worked for me as well. Because I used to have what I call the fiat brain, where you work, you get money, and you spend money immediately, and that's how we've been trained in our system. You've been given a credit card if you live in the United States or elsewhere. You get your money and you buy goods, you buy services, you spend it on frivolous things, right? We don't have a savings culture in the United States anymore, or in many places across the world, due to fiat, because fiat does not value your time, right? And it's not based on anything. Whereas Bitcoin, it changed my mindset. It made me understand that savings is very good. So when you have a low time preference, and low time preference meaning that you work to save and not spend, you want to wait over time to spend your money as you accumulate, versus a high time preference, meaning that you get money and spend it immediately. So once you start understanding that, and individuals start understanding that over time, it changes their mindset, and you start building up your reserves and start saving money because you can't really save in fiat currencies anymore, such as the dollar or even the Guyanese dollar, due to inflation. As you saw, right? 23% you lost since what, 2020 in Guyana and the United States. If I can find the chart of the dollar's performance since its purchasing power since it's 1971, since it depegged, it's it's really astronomical how much the United States has lost value. The United States dollar has lost value over time.
Yeah,
Do you
okay.
see that chart there?
Yeah.
Is it fully on the screen?
Yeah, it's full on the screen. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So you see here the purchasing power of the United States. It's lost over 87% of its purchasing power since 1971,
Hmm. Okay.
right? And you can say the same thing for the Guyanese dollar, even though the Guyanese dollar is holding up fairly well.
Folks, you're listening to Globespan Television, and like I'm in school learning something here about investment and Bitcoin and so forth. My question to you is this. If someone invests 10,000 US dollars in Bitcoin today, what do you think will be the estimated value by 2030 in the next 5 years?
So next 5 years, 2030, say 10,000 US dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're if the projections are right, that 2030, and this all depends on where you buy it from, the low or the high or somewhere in between. So let's say you buy it at $100,000, which it is today for in US dollars, and it goes up to $350,000. You would be making, let me see how many X's that would be. Would it be 2X? Three and a half, it'd be 3.5x. So now that $10,000, if my math is correct, bear with me for a second. Let me do this math. It'd be 350,000 minus or divided by 100,000. I think it's going to be 3.5x, like I was saying. So you would have $350,000. Sorry, you would have $35,000 if you invested 10,000.
By 2030 in 5 years?
Yes. On average, if it does a 3.5x. Now on average, Bitcoin's going up about 50% a year, right? So that's the ballpark figure that I would give you.
Well, if it goes by 50% a year, what will be the outcome in 2030 for 10,000?
I was saying about $35,000 you'd be up because that would be about a 3x if it hits $350,000, right? So if it hits $500,000 like many people are projecting, so then that 10,000 would become 50,000.
Okay. Okay. So it's a good investment. There's no question about that.
The only
Uh,
thing is that you have to stomach the volatility, right? It's not going to be easy to stomach the volatility if it's money that you cannot afford to lose. I would not put money that you can afford to lose into Bitcoin, right? If you need to live with that money, right? It's going to be money that you can set aside. So I use what you call a dollar cost averaging method. So, if I work and I make some money and I have some money left over at the end of the month, then I will allocate a percentage to Bitcoin over time. So, and what that will do is it will level it out, right? So if you buy high and buy low and buy high and buy low over the course of the next 5 years, it will balance out.
the general belief is that you should invest in stocks or anything that with money that you don't need. If you need the money, then you don't invest it because you're going to be nervous because stocks, like Bitcoin goes up and down and like anything else. Now, gold is a very stable mineral. Every country will want to have gold today because gold continues to increase. And the prediction is by the end of the year, gold should be about $5,000 an ounce. But I don't think it's going to reach it. I think it's about 4,000 or so an ounce now. But you can never tell with gold. What are some of the benefits of someone to invest in gold?
Well, first, I'm going to say that I'm not a gold expert. However, I can say from my little understanding of gold is that gold holds its value over time, right? And it's stable. It's less volatile than Bitcoin. It can go up, it can go down. However, it won't go up and be as volatile as an asset because it's an older asset that has a longer, you know, time in existence, right? It's a $30 trillion asset. If you can see my screen here, right? Gold price in Guyanese dollars per ounce over time. So back in 2000, you can get an ounce of gold for less than 100,000 Guyanese dollars. And today it's approaching $900,000 for an ounce. Is that math correct?
Yeah, it seems so. Yeah.
Right. So if you were to hold gold for, a little under $100,000 in the year 2000 to now, that's an incredible amount of profit,
Mhm.
as you can see from the chart.
Yeah. Okay. So gold is much more stable than Bitcoin at this stage because it's one of the traditional minerals or currency, so to speak.
It's been around for 5,000 years, I mean, even a blind monkey can see gold shining. So it just makes sense in an inflationary environment where we're going through a monetary regime change throughout the world. The days of the fiat currency, the US dollar, is coming to an end. Yes, people will say, oh, yes, more than 57% of trade is being done in US dollars. Yes, that's true. However, over time, it's going to diminish, as you can see it happening already. The Russians are not using US dollars. The Chinese are starting to dump US treasuries. So that's going to be a process that's going to continue, and people are going to start using their own currencies. Countries are going to start using their own currencies, and individuals who are investing in in stocks, for instance, or real estate, are coming to the slow realization that investing in real estate is might be not that profitable anymore due to the fact that it's priced in a fiat currency, whether it's a Guyanese dollar or the US dollar. So taking, for instance, real estate, which is, my background. Real estate, you have to have overhead costs. You have to repair the building. You have to pay taxes. You have to, you know, keep up maintenance, like I was mentioning before. And then you have to pay insurance. There's a whole bunch of things that come with it. So on average in the US, your return on investment with real estate can be anywhere between 5 to 10% in whatever region that you're in. But if the US dollar is losing 10% a year, you're not making any money with real estate. And the same thing goes for stocks. If you're holding a stock, a US stock, it's priced and denominated in US dollars. So if that stock is not making more than 10% a year, you're not making anything, right? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. But the stock market for this year went up by almost, I think it's all about the electronic stocks and Nasdaq, and it went up by almost 40% this year already. And so what you're saying, that 40% minus 10%, so it's only 30% gain you're making.
Correct. And it's going to continue diminishing over time because, you know, look at the position that the West is in, the United States, for instance. They have $37 trillion of debt. And the only way they believe that they can get out of this debt is by printing more money to inflate their way out of the debt. So the United States dollar over time is actually going to lose more purchasing power than it already does.
Let's go to Guyana. Guyana has a huge gold reserves.
Do they?
Yeah, I don't know, thousands of ounces of gold is there. The amount I don't know for sure. So what do you think? You think the government should hold gold as one of these reserves so that it can stem inflation?
I think yes, but the last time I checked, I don't see Guyana holding any golds in its reserves. That's when I check. I don't see it anywhere. However, I'll believe what you're saying. And I think that, yes, Guyana should accumulate as much gold as possible. They should not be selling gold off to the rest of the world. They should be hoarding gold like a hungry person would hoard food.
But if it's hoard gold, what that means, how that will help the country.
Well, it will help the country because now you have something strong that's going to be backing the dollar, which will increase the value of its dollar because you have this gold reserve that you can use as a hedge against inflation. So that over time will tend to bring costs of goods and services down, right? Look at, for instance, we had this discussion before about farming and how expensive food is in Guyana. It's extremely expensive. The average Guyanese person I mentioned before spends 60% of their income on food alone. So if the average Guyanese person can start saving in gold, right, and gold's going up on what on average 10 to 11% a year, you're going to be in a much better position over time, and it will help bring down the cost of goods and services, right? As well. So, and the same thing goes for the Guyanese government. You want to get ahead of the game, right? As much as possible, because what's coming down the pipeline is not very good. The United States is in the twilight zone right now. They're in full out panic zone. Look at Scotty Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury. They're basically screaming out that they're in an emergency. They want emergency powers to basically boost the US economy. If I could share this screen over here, let me see if I can find this real quick. They've called on Superman, Mr. Jamie Dimon, to come in and help bail them out. I'm going to find this right here. And he made this announcement recently. Let's see here.
Jamie Dimon, let me for our listeners,
The
is CEO for uh,
Chase Bank.
Case Bank and one a very, very good economist, or I should say.
Right. So as you can see here, JP Morgan Chase launches 1.5 trillion security and resiliency initiative to boost critical industries. And this happened because the Chinese have decided to basically cut off, rare earth minerals to the United States. That's got them in a tizzy, right? So the question becomes now, when Superman himself comes in to help us, Jamie Dimon, and print up all this money, because that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to print this money. What's going to happen to the US dollar and what's going to happen to countries that holds dollars like the United States for trade? They're going to lose value, right? And the tariffs don't necessarily help the situation. The United States does not have the leverage over China at this current moment. The Chinese are holding most of the cards. So it's going to be a difficult position for any country that's going to be holding US dollars. It's just going to diminish in value. Look at US treasuries, for instance. US treasuries brought back, I believe, was less than 1% return. I may be wrong on this number, but the return on holding US treasuries is terrible. And they're being dumped by countries all across the world. Even Canada recently, I think, sold off $37 billion of US treasuries. So the writing is on the wall, you know what I mean? And you can sit there and, be in denial about this, but this is what's happening. You can wish away the debt, but that's not going to happen that easily. You know, look at look at the rare earth mineral situation that the United States is actually facing. Do you see that on my screen right now?
Yeah,
Where it says how China's rare earth restrictions could disrupt the U.S. defense and industry and reignite a trade war? Is that showing up on your screen?
yeah, it's showing up on the screen. Yeah,
Yeah. So that and alone has put United States in a bad position, right? Because I believe it's 78% of rare earth minerals are produced in China, right? So what is the United States going to do in this situation? They have to print more money to build up their manufacturing capabilities so they can produce their own rare earth minerals because they no longer want to be reliant on China. What is that going to do for the dollar? Debase the currency, right? On Wall Street right now, they've rehashed a term and came up with a new one called the debasement trade. Everyone's running away from the dollar into stocks, Bitcoin, gold, and any other hard commodity they can put their hands on. right? The EU, look at the EU right here. It's saying the EU urges swift action on unlocking frozen Russian assets. They're basically going to be stealing, close to $300 billion US dollars. I mean, right, from the Russians because they're in a difficult position. They cut themselves off from cheap Russian gas. So what are they going to do? They're going to have to print money themselves. So you're going to have this currency debasement taking place all over the world, especially in the West.
Let me go back to a fundamental question here. Generations upon generations grew up believing in the US currency. That's a culture that existed for years. How would you get these people to move away from the US currency and go into other currencies like Bitcoin and so forth? It is a difficult process because some people just can't tell them anything. They will say what you're saying, it's garbage. They will hold or hoard US currency.
I know many people will say this guy is talking crazy talk. The dollar is going to be here. It's going to be here for the longest. It's going to last forever. But you know what? Go back in history and check the history of fiat currencies. Before the US dollar, the world reserve money or currency was the British pound, right? Before that, you had the French, you had the Portuguese, you had the Dutch. So most of the times, you see, history tells us that fiat currencies at some point goes to zero, and people move on to hard assets. And look at, for instance, how did the United States and Europe become powerful in the 1880s besides wars? What did they do? They were using gold as their medium of exchange. You can go back to the Romans. The Romans were using gold. But let's stick to the West, where the United States and the Western countries were able to basically outcompete the Chinese and the Indians at the time and during the 1880s who were on the silver standard. Silver standard cannot beat the gold standard because gold is more of a scarce asset, right? So to answer your question, we're not going to be able to save everyone, right? There's going to be those people who are going to be in denial and they're not going to understand the situation and they're going to be left behind. But then there's going to be those people who are going to be open-minded, willing to learn, right? And basically move ahead. And a lot of people are going to say, well, this guy's talking about how Guyana should hold gold in the reserves. And they're going to probably say to themselves, or Caribbean countries hold gold in reserves, that these politicians are going to steal all the gold. They're going to put it in their pockets for themselves. And that may be the case. However, what we are seeing throughout the rest of the world is a movement towards good governance. You're seeing it protests all across Africa and you're seeing it in Asia. The youth have had enough. They want to see governments build their economy, build roads, have better education, better health systems. So I believe I'm not worried about that aspect because that is a wave that's coming across the rest of the world. The older generations, sure, they may not believe it, but the younger generations are moving towards digital assets such as Bitcoin. And I think actually Bitcoin is going to be the winner over gold because I don't think younger generations are going to be holding gold as much as they're going to be holding Bitcoin. Why? Because they all have cell phones, mobile apps. It's the digital generation.
So, and the younger generation, and the world is moving towards a younger generation indeed. But are the Chinese are investing in Bitcoin though?
The Chinese are the second largest holders of Bitcoin, basically through seizures. And the Chinese through Hong Kong are, doing a test run with digital assets and they're starting to legitimize it. So they're going to be holding it as well as, they understand that they're going to need a hedge as well. They're moving in the direction of gold right now and they're holding gold in their treasuries, I mean in their coffers. But at the same time, they do hold some Bitcoin. So you're going to see a combination of both. And the Chinese are very smart. They've been around for 5,000 years. So they're privy to the game and they're going to be holding both assets because if they're going to learn from history, what they went through in the 1880s where they were holding silver while the West was holding gold and they end up losing out. I don't think they're going to make that mistake once again. But time will tell. They have developed a CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency, and a lot of people are afraid of that because it's very centralized. But you're seeing the growth of the BRICS countries, for instance. They have larger GDP than the EU and the United States put together, including Japan. So you were seeing this movement towards not only what people call the global south, I like to call them the global majority, with BRICS leading the way.
Explain the term BRICS to the listeners. I know it's Brazil. Go ahead.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Those are the five countries that make up BRICS.
But a number of other countries have joined recently.
A lot more countries have joined recently, and the numbers are going to continue rising. So, the best option if the United States wants to get themselves out of this problem is to drop the United States dollar as reserve currency. But they won't do it because it provides them with power. But for the time being, that would be, the best option for the United States. We'll see. Time will tell. I think what they're going to do is they're going to try to use stable coins to inflate away the debt and then hold Bitcoin and gold and maybe possibly reprice gold in the future because they're holding about $1 trillion worth of gold at the moment, if not a little bit higher.
And the United States is the largest holder of Bitcoin as we speak. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, what would you tell our listeners when it comes to investments? The people they will buy stocks and so forth. Should they invest in Bitcoin? Should they invest in gold? Should they invest in stocks? Which should be preferable to them, you think?
Well, for myself, and I can speak for myself, I'm biased to Bitcoin. So I'm obviously going to say Bitcoin because it's digital, it's saleable, I can move it over time, and its appreciation, it's the fastest horse in the race. It's going to appreciate faster than gold. And again, stocks are denominated in US dollars, so is real estate. So what you want is to hold a neutral reserve asset or a neutral asset such as Bitcoin.
So they should invest in Bitcoin. So what should be the second choice?
In this current monetary environment where you have continuous debasement, that would be gold, right? And if you're running a business and you have a lot of profits, you want to cycle 10, 15, maybe 20% of those profits into Bitcoin and gold, right? So you have a hedge for both because Bitcoin's more volatile, it's going to go up and down. Maybe a lot of people can't stomach it. But once you understand it, it makes a lot more sense and become if you have a long-term perspective, and that's what I was explaining before, the low time preference versus the high time preference. When you have a low time preference, you have a long-term view. You're going to want to hold this asset 5, 10, 15, 20 years and hand it down to your children. The same thing with gold. With the US dollar or any kind of fiat currency, you can't have a long-term outlook because it's just losing value on a daily.
Okay, that's good. Now, Bitcoin, as you said, how much million? 21 million?
Is going to be the total amount of Bitcoin that's ever going to be mined.
Why only that amount?
They put a cap on it, right? Which adds scarcity to it, and that's what adds the value.
So the scarcity drives up the value of it.
Right, because you have shocks, right? So every 4 years, they have a halving where they cut the amount of Bitcoin that's mined. So now we're down to 3.12 every year, right? So when that happened every day, so what happens is the next halving that will cut that down into half of 3.12. So now you're going to have a price shock. And due to the fact that there's so much illiquid supply of Bitcoin, the price shoots up in a parabolic manner, right? So if I share this chart over here, you'll see here Bitcoin's illiquid supply. There's about 14 million Bitcoin that's not moving at this current stage, right? People are just holding. They're called hodlers. You just hold your Bitcoin, and people like Jamie Dimon call it a pet rock, a shiny pet rock that's useless and you can't do anything with it. And they have this opinion with gold as well. They're like, what are you going to do with gold? You just hold it. But guess what? Both of these scarce, neutral, hard assets outperform stocks, outperform real estate, outperform any kind of fiat currency you have in the world today, right? Look at the British pound, for instance. It's lost 20% over the past 5 years. The euro has lost 19% of its purchasing power over the past 5 years. The Canadian dollar has lost 15% of its purchasing power. We talked about Guyana losing 23% of its purchasing power, and the United States dollar has lost between 25 to 28% of its purchasing power for the past 5 years. So the price of goods and services, if you're an American, you're a Guyanese, you're Canadian, you're a European, if you're holding the currency of your country, you're just going to be losing and paying more for less because the currency is going to be worth less.
Where oil comes into all of this. We
Well,
have gold,
oil is
we
a
have
commodity, yeah.
Bitcoin.
Go
Go
ahead.
on. Where oil comes in.
Well, oil is a commodity, right? It's not as scarce. It's available, but I'm not no oil expert, so I can't really speak to oil. That's what I would say. But we guess what? If you hold oil, it's going to do better than holding a dollar. If listen, a bottle of water will hold more value than the dollar. It keeps on going up, right? You know what I mean? My toothbrush is going to go up. Everything's going to go up against the dollar or any kind of fiat currency over time.
Folks, let's take a commercial break here again. And we're talking about allfromOneSupplier.com. That's where you can go and get all your West Indian food, your groceries, your roti, your fish, your curry, your meat, you name it. And you can have home deliveries as well. You also use your EBT card, your credit cards, your debit cards. All from OneSupplier.com will supply you with everything you need when it comes to West Indian dishes and foods. So you can check them out at 10809 Liberty Avenue in Richmond Hill in Queens. And the number to call is 718-551-3292. 718-551-3292. All from OneSupplier.com. Go on that website and you can place your order and it will be delivered to your home. I can assure you that. Then Globespan, TravelSpan. TravelSpan has been in business for almost 31 years, and their experience, they will ease all your traveling needs, your traveling problems. You just call Globespan and your problems will be over. They can book your hotel, book your flight, you name it. Whatever part of the world you want to go, Globespan will take you there. They have trips going to Dubai, India, South Africa, Norway, and several other countries. And these are upcoming tours. So you can call Globespan and get into one of those tours immediately. The number to call is 718-845-0437. 718-845-0437. They're located there in New York at 10809 Liberty Avenue and Richmond Hill as well. And in Georgetown, you can call 227-1701. 227-1701. Rose Hall Tongue, you can call them at 337-4287. And they're also in Trinidad and Tobago, in Laguna. The number there to call is 665-3383. And in Val Park, also in Trinidad, 645-1604. So call TravelSpan for all your traveling needs. And all from one supply for all your West Indian dishes needs. Please. Thank you for listening. Now let's get back to investments. investing in Bitcoin is not a risk.
Yes, it is. It is a risk. Investing in anything is a risk. Holding a US dollar is a risk. Your risk of losing purchasing power, right? We all feel it, whether it's Guyanese dollars too. We feel it. Food's more expensive, and so this is a risk that you want to take, but you can mitigate the risk by not using money that you can't afford to lose, right? Take a look, for instance. Now, just 5 years ago, all the institutional investors wanted no part of Bitcoin. Look at this screen right here that I'm sharing. This is the Bitcoin ETFs that were approved in the United States, right? And this is the amount of Bitcoin that they have under management as of October 20th, 2025, $146 billion they're holding of Bitcoin, right? You see that on your screen, right?
Right, yeah.
Right? And these are institutional investors, BlackRock, Fidelity. Soon, Bitcoin's going to be available for your pension in the United States and possibly other parts of the world. So, if the institutional investor who was adverse and couldn't stand Bitcoin 5 years ago is now on the bandwagon, that says a lot.
Agreed. Uh, um, the US dollar, you said, is sinking. And we all know that because of all the funds that it's 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 debt, which is $37 trillion. No country can actually survive in that type of debt. So what we're looking at here is that a shift from the US currency could make Bitcoin becomes far more important.
Agreed. You know, look at the top 100 public companies. Am I sharing this screen? Do you see this? Top 100 public companies?
No, I haven't seen that screen.
Okay, I'm going to share this screen with you guys to show you that even the public companies are getting in on the game as soon as I can find this. Okay, wait, stop share that. Okay, here we go. So now you can see that, right? The top 100 public Bitcoin treasury companies in the United States and across the world. You have Strategy leading the way with 640,000 Bitcoins that they're holding, which is worth billions and billions of dollars. So you have companies all across the world from the United States, Japan, China, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, you name it. They're all slowly realizing that, hey, wait, we have all this money on our balance sheets and it's burning away because of inflation. They're losing it, right? If you're losing 10% a year on holding $1 billion, that's a lot of money, right? That's $100 million, if I'm not mistaken. So companies are like, hey, we have to hedge against this. We're going to buy Bitcoin because that's the fastest horse, right? So this is another reason why, Bitcoin is going to continuously grow over time. I believe that it's going to hit $1 million by 2035 for one coin. That's US. That's going to be an astronomical amount of money. And it's going to, you said there's the 24,000 millionaires from Bitcoin. I think there's going to be a lot more over time, right? Because you're going to see more and more treasury companies pop up over time. But listen, Bitcoin's not going to go up in a straight line, folks, right? It's going to have ebbs and flows like you just see today or yesterday. Gold crashed after hitting 43 or $4,400 an ounce. I saw people lining up on the streets of Australia around the corner to buy gold at its all-time high. The people who have been holding gold for years are looking and saying, hey, that's our exit liquidity. But that's okay. Those people should continue holding that gold that they bought at the top, because in the next 5 years, I believe gold will hit $10,000. Right? And same thing with Bitcoin. It's going to keep on going up.
So you're saying that these top 100 public companies are investing in Bitcoin. This means that you're saying that they don't trust the US dollar.
Correct. Faith in the US dollar, faith in any fiat currency is is like, it's like circling the toilet. The US dollar is like circling the toilet, and every other fiat currency is like circling the toilet for lack of better terms. And it's going to continue. There's a lack of public trust in their governments and in their currency. And that's going to continue rise as there's more education and awareness to Bitcoin and actually the properties of gold as well.
What about the British pound, the euro dollar, the Canadian dollar? What are those? What about those?
I'd mentioned before that the Canadian dollar has lost, 15% of its purchasing power in over the past 5 years. The euro has lost 20% of its purchasing power, as well as the British pound. I think the euro is 19%, the British pound is 20%. So those currencies as well. I mean, look at the state that Europe is in. They're losing all their industries, right? Because they don't have cheap available gas anymore. They've cut themselves off and shooting themselves in the foot in regards to cheap Russian gas, right? Now they have to get LNG gas from the United States at triple the cost, or if not more. And then you have, for instance, France, who basically has been kicked out of North Africa and West Africa. They've been kicked out of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. They no longer have access to cheap uranium to power their nuclear power plants. I mean, look at France. How many prime ministers have they had in the past, what, 3 months? I think three of them or two of them?
Three of them.
Three of them. And then look at the UK. They've had four prime ministers over the past 5 years. And people are telling me that Europe is stable. And in the United States, we have a president that was a TV show host. I mean, things are not looking good, right? And they're going to continuously get worse because of fiat currency. What is the thing is that people need to understand is that fiat currency robs you of your time and energy. There's a young man called Jack Mallers. He's the owner of Strike and 21. He accumulates Bitcoin, and he has a good quote which I'll read. It says, "Money is your time and energy in an abstracted form." And he believes that it's disrespectful for governments to disrespect your time, to waste your time, because you're sitting there working for a wage in a currency that's being debased. So whenever I see, labor unions and labor strikes, and Bernie Sanders is out there and he's saying we need to raise minimum wage for people to $14. Okay, great. You raise the minimum wage on a currency that's debasing. So you got to continuously raise that wage. You might as well put some of that money into a hard asset such as gold or Bitcoin. And that's the way to win. That's how I'm seeing it. It's going to be like this for the foreseeable future.
What about the Chinese currency? Has it
That
lost some of its value too?
Yes, that's going to continue losing value too, because the Chinese have to keep their currency low in order to continue exporting throughout
Yeah,
the rest of the world,
right, right.
right? So it's almost like a race to the bottom when it comes to fiat currencies, whether it's the US dollar or the Chinese yuan, they're going to keep that low because they both want to export, right? And China's having the other opposite part of the problem. They're having a deflationary problem, right? People in China are hesitant to buy real estate because they believe the price will continue to drop. So, what do you want? Inflation or deflation? Either is not necessarily good. You want to be more stable. In a lot of ways, you can say that Bitcoin and gold's price and Bitcoin's volatility is a reflection of the instability of fiat currencies. It's kind of a mirror reflecting in a way.
So Bitcoin is a way to the future from what you're saying.
I think it's now. Bitcoin is not the future. It's now. If you scrape up as many pennies, dollars as you possibly can, and think long term, invest in it long term, because one of the key things about Bitcoin, which I should have mentioned earlier, is that like gold, you can borrow against your Bitcoin. You can borrow against your gold. So that way you don't have to sell it, right? So you can borrow, use it to buy goods and services. As you work, you can pay back. And the great thing about it is it keeps on rising in value, right? So you're borrowing against something that's rising in value. And this is what you see all these guys on Wall Street doing. They're all borrowing billions and billions of dollars and buying Bitcoin. And I think in the future, they're going to be doing gold as well, if not already.
So I want you to repeat to all our listeners in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, Guyana, the Caribbean, and around the world. Why is it important for them to invest in Bitcoin now? But they must invest the money that they don't need urgently. Just put the money there and let it stay, and it will, I want you to reinforce that to our listeners.
Yeah, once again, it's because we live in a time where fiat currencies are not backed by anything. They're being printed by governments to pay off debts. They have major debts deficits that will continue for the foreseeable future, for the rest of our lifetimes, and probably our children and grandchildren's lifetime, if the system does not break down. You're going to see we're in the process of a monetary change where the reserve currency of the world, the US dollar, is going to continue to be debased, and they have a $37 trillion deficit, right? So I think that your viewers who are watching this should take a step back, do their own research. Don't believe me. Go and do your own research. And I would say an hour spent studying Bitcoin is like wasting 30 minutes. That's how much and how powerful Bitcoin is. So that's what I'll repeat it again. An hour studying Bitcoin is like wasting 30 minutes of your time. And I think that individuals should do that. Look into it. Be a little bit curious. Just don't be like, this boy doesn't know what he's talking about. We're not going to like get into this. Like I said, do your own research. Don't believe me. Go check the stats for yourself. I've been sharing charts left, right, and center. I started off a little rusty, but I got the hang of it with a little bit of time because this is my first YouTube. But take a look and look at Bitcoin's performance. If I can share one more chart real quickly, it's a straight arrow up pretty much. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Let to share my desktop screens. Okay, here we go. Look, at just real brief before I share that chart, you can see here the Dutch seized a Chinese plant. This is how desperate they're getting in Europe, right? Where they're seizing, a Chinese plant in the Netherlands. But I'm going to move on to the chart here. Where is this chart? Here we go. Do you see this Bitcoin chart?
Yeah.
Look at this chart from inception. And it's just going to continue going up and up and up over time because of the currency debasement, right? So I would say take a look and also, sign up for an exchange, get your feet wet, put a little bit of money in, see what it does. And then when you feel more comfortable, put in a little bit more. But remember, it's a long-term play. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. I want to repeat that. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. The idea here is to invest over the long term, right? And the same thing goes for governments around the world. You know, Caribbean governments or South American governments, African governments. This is something that you should look into, right? And look into the benefits of holding a neutral asset. You're going to be, resistant to sanctions. So if the United States doesn't like the way you look, they can't sanction you. You have another payment rail that you can develop. And what does this do for your country? You can now start developing digital assets and digital payment rails within your country so you don't have to be dependent on the Americans or even the Chinese. And if you accumulate enough Bitcoin as a government, then over time you can borrow against your own money, your Bitcoin with your own money. So that way you don't have to take out IMF loans or take out loans from the Chinese or the Americans, right? You don't have to be dependent on them. You can forge your own course to financial freedom and independence, right? You can decolonize yourselves, right? As nations, right? And individuals, right? Because you become your own bank. Holding Bitcoin, right, as a digital asset is a way to become your own bank with your own payment rails that you don't have to be dependent on a third party that's going to be charging you fees that can sanction you, freeze your money. The Russians are going through it right now. They're feeling the pain of having over $300 billion frozen and the Europeans taking that money and giving it to Ukraine, right? Whatever side you are on that war, that's not my concern. The issue is the fact that your money can be frozen if you're using foreign currencies, the euro, the dollar. And I believe that over time, if the Chinese renminbi or yuan becomes a reserve currency, they're going to do the same thing over time. I could be wrong. The Chinese have not, at the moment shown any indication of having such behavior, but things changes when you rise to power and gain more power. You want to preserve that power and you're going to use whatever levers and leverage you have to maintain it.
We have come to the end of the program. Can you believe an hour and a half went by so fast?
It did, and I feel like I haven't even done this justice.
No, you did a very, very good job. And I hope our
Thank you.
listeners were at least listen to you and at least they learned something. It's like a course being offered for an hour and a half. And I personally learned a lot, even though I am versed in the areas as well, but in investments, but I learned a lot. So I must thank you for that. So with that said, you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I hope to be back maybe in the next few years. We can have this discussion again and see where Bitcoin is at and see where gold is at. And I want to say to your viewers, once again, thank you for listening in and giving me the time. I can be found on Substack at Real Rose at Substack, and I could be found at LinkedIn if you want any counseling, especially if you have a company or if you're a government that wants some counseling in regards to building a Bitcoin treasury. I'm available. So thank you for that for giving me this time on your platform. It's greatly appreciated. And this is one for the history books that I can share with my children and grandchildren and your great grandchildren one day. Thank you again, Dad.
Tell them again where you can be found.
I can be found on Substack at Real Rose backslash
Spell
Substack.
it out for them.
Okay, I'm gonna spell it. I shared it earlier. Give me 1 second here. Let me spell it out for you. Okay. Okay, so it's gonna be realrose.substack.com. And then I could be found on LinkedIn.
Spell
LinkedIn.
Substack.
Okay. Real, which is REALE dot substac.com, and LinkedIn, which is LIKEDIN .com/IN Real Rose, which is REALEROSE. So I can be found there, and hopefully whoever is in charge of the YouTube can actually add my credentials to the YouTube video so they can find it in the description.
Okay. Thanks a lot for joining me tonight. It was a pleasure having you. And I hope our listeners, as I said, learned a lot. Thanks to Noir Singh for making this program available. And thanks to Devin Bissoon and Ryan Kissoon. And special thanks to all our listeners and our sponsors tonight. It's been a very, very valuable program. And I said it was like a course, a course in investment and on Bitcoin. As I said, Real, who's my son, has been a specialist in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and so forth. And you've heard him yourself. And anything you need, just contact him on the addresses he gave to you there, or you can give me a call and I can connect you directly to him so that he can provide some valuable advice to you all. So thanks again to all our listeners, and thanks to Globespan and for having us there. Thank you very much and good night.